they came up and shook my hand and thanked me for an amazing speech. They learned so much, and they wanted to apologize for the way that they had come in.
If you're looking for clear pro-life thinking, cutting-edge apologetics, and a fresh approach to abortion dialogue, you've come to the right place. This is the Equipped for Life podcast.
And we are back for part 2 of Outreach Story.
Woohoo!
Yay! So let's start with an awesome story. This is one of the coolest things that has happened in a while. This is one of the few, like, I know this story a little bit, and it blew my mind when I heard it. So I know that you've written an article about this. So if people want to share this amazing story with other people, that's
Please
a very
share this amazing story.
shareable thing. But for those that, you know, there's people that just watch the podcasts and videos and don't read the articles, and that's fine. So for their sake, go ahead and tell us this amazing story.
So a couple of months ago, I was doing a public speech and outreach at a college out in Rhode Island, and I had a group of pro-choice students show up to protest my speech.
Oh, fine.
Something that every pro-life speaker, I'm sure, looks forward to.
Oh, yeah. We have a whole podcast that we did like 4 or 5 years ago on a speech that I got, my speech that got sort of protested in ways that I could have handled it even better. Like we kind of used it as like here's like a learning opportunity. Here's Josh did some good things and Josh probably could have done this thing better. And I'll link to it in the description. I haven't heard it since we did it like 5 years ago, but I know that we did that. And I still remember the Canadian school talk that we were referencing in that episode. That'll stay with me, I think, forever.
There are certain things that we do that will live forever in our brains.
It's
yes.
just like, you know, people stand out. So so you got protested.
I did. So I was like maybe 10-ish minutes before my speech was supposed to start. I was standing up front, just chit-chatting with students as they were coming in. I try to always start my speeches out really casual, helping people feel welcome and understand that this is just a space we're going to have a good conversation tonight. And so I was doing that as usual, and I spotted them the moment they walked in. It was these 3 pro-choice girls who were basically walking pro-choice billboards. Like, they had clearly decorated themselves their own outfits. Like, they had gone to Hobby Lobby and bought just solid pink t-shirts, which they then cut into crop tops and then like covered in puffy paint, which is a thing that I didn't know people still did.
What's puffy paint?
Okay, see, you don't know what it is either. This was a thing when I was in like elementary school. We definitely made some shirts in elementary school from puffy paint. Puffy paint is like, it's paint. It's called puffy paint because it's puffy. I don't really know how to describe this well on a podcast. I'm working on it, Josh. Here's my call to you. If you're listening to this podcast right now, hit pause. Right. Go Google puffy paint.
Okay, that's what I'm going to do right now. What the heck are you talking about?
Basically what it is, I'll do my best. If you're driving right now and you can't pull over and Google it, it is like paint in a bottle that you squeeze out onto like a shirt. It's meant to do on clothing. And then when it dries, it kind of puffs up into like 3D letters almost. See?
Yeah.
Josh has got a picture of it
this
now.
This is kind of an old-fashioned thing, right?
Oh, this is the thing that like I did with my babysitter when I was in elementary school. She would like bring over something and we'd like puffy paint. It's
like my grandparents had puffy paint sweatshirts and stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm tracking with you now.
So, these girls went to Hobby Lobby and bought t-shirts, cut them into crop tops, took puffy paint, and then wrote pro-choice slogans all over their shirts. Okay. It was very unique. Okay. And then the rest of their ensemble outfit things, they had clearly created to go with that. So we had like mini skirts and fishnets and heels and their pink crop top pro-choice shirt and like very like feminist earrings. I think one of them like literally was wearing earrings of women. It was like a modern art of a woman's body, like was her earring. Like it was a look.
Yeah, okay? They were having a moment, as Brad Mondo would say.
Having a moment. So I see that walk in the room and I'm like, I know who those girls are. Yeah. And they basically literally marched themselves in a row into the second row of my speech. They like came right to the front. They were here. And
they wanted to be in the front. They didn't want to get spit on, so they were one row back.
Yes, they were in the second row.
Yeah.
And they had their backpacks, they set their backpacks down, and they come out with these giant notebooks that I can see there's writing on it. And I'm like, I don't know
They're ready to go.
Maybe this is their notebook from class and they're ready to take notes during my speech. Maybe they've been looking me up and they've already have pages of notes. I don't know. But we have giant notebook, pens in hand in the second row. Okay, you cannot miss it.
Yeah.
And I will admit, I was nervous.
Oh, yeah. I'd be really nervous. I'd be like, oh, no.
Yeah, exactly.
This is going to be what's going to happen. I've got to work with the club now on like contingency plans.
Yep. Because, I mean, I've watched videos of conservative type speakers on college campuses before. I've seen videos of people getting shouted down, of a speaker having to have public safety remove the students or remove themselves. I've seen videos of speakers who had to like be escorted off campus for their own safety. Like
there's multiple speaking events now that I've had to do where I've had to work with a security person and they're showing me like exit paths, like escape routes, like all these different things.
Yeah.
It's
a thing. We've never had something that severe happen.
Yeah.
But we've had to have those conversations.
Yes.
And so I was playing through the scene in my head and trying to figure out, okay, if these girls start like shouting down my speech.
I'm going to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you. Let me add a little correction. None of those things have ended up happening. I think there are possibly multiple times where it would have happened if I had not started the speech the way that I did. I have seen people come clearly planning on interrupting and causing a whole thing.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's just that, I think you and I probably do a fairly similar thing of like welcoming pro-choice people, thanking them for coming, trying to get people's defenses down. And I've seen people just be like they change their entire kind of body language. And so I imagine
that's exactly what happened with these girls.
Okay.
That is 100% what happened with these girls.
So the only reason we haven't gotten massively protested and shouted out of a room possibly is because of specifically the way that we do talks.
Yes. We are very intentional about what we do in those first few seconds that they hear me speaking. And that makes all the difference. And it did for these girls because they came in with full intentions of protesting the speech. And I know that for a fact because they told me later and we'll get there. But anyways,
Spoiler alert.
I'm playing the scene in my head. I am absolutely terrified of what these girls might do.
Yeah.
And so I get up. It's time to start my speech. And I start it the way that I always do. Exactly what you just said, Josh. I have this classic opening where I talk about how I think that our society is horrible at engaging with people with different ideas. And I'm really excited to have pro-choice people here. And as a matter of fact, I compliment the pro-choice and the people in the room. And I say, pro-lifers in the room, look around you. That pro-choice person sitting next to you, they are the model for what I want you to be like.
Ooh, I like that.
Because they are doing something inherently hard right now.
Yeah.
They are going and listening to someone that they know they're going to disagree with talk. They are trying to figure out and understand someone on the other side, and they're giving them the space to do that. And I think pro-life people on the whole don't listen to pro-choice people enough. They don't go out of their way to try to listen to them and understand where they're coming from and give them the space to have their ideas be heard. And so the pro-choice people in the room right now are the models for what I'm trying to teach pro-life people to be like.
There's a reason why I often warn the leader ahead of time that I'm going to do a whole kind of long thing in the beginning. It's just like, I know this is going to seem over the top. Trust me, it's necessary, but like, that's not going to be the whole speech. It's just like, I'm going to take a few minutes though and try to set the stage and prevent worse things from happening. And
throw pro-lifers under the bus a little bit.
Absolutely.
I throw pro-lifers, I throw conservatives under the bus and really elevate pro-choice people and the conversation that we're going to have and how important it is and how intelligent I think pro-choice people are. It is all very intentional because it works. And I start doing this and I literally watched these girls just like their face completely changed. I just watched it melt off of them. And they just turned into curious. You aren't what I thought. What's going on?
It's like the best place to have them in if they're in the audience of a speech. Like, yes, I want you curious.
And so they sat there super respectfully, whole speech. I'm giving my bodily autonomy speech. It's like an hour and a half long.
Right.
Like, it's long.
Right. It's our longest lecture,
Yes.
for sure.
And get to the end. It's time for Q&A. The girls raised their hands. They asked 2 super respectful, standard questions during Q&A. Nothing weird, nothing hostile, nothing at all, really. And finish up. It's been about 2 hours. I did about 30 minutes of Q&A at that speech because there were a ton of questions.
Nice.
And so finish up. It's like 9 p.m. And I invite anyone who wants to continue chatting with me. You know, I'm just going to be hanging out up here. You're welcome to come up. These girls make a beeline for me. And I'm like, uh-oh, here it comes. They held it in the whole speech. I'm going to get it now.
Right.
And that's not what happened either.
Huh.
They came up and shook my hand and thanked me for an amazing speech. They learned so much, and they wanted to apologize for the way that they had come in. And here's where I learned their whole backstory. So we sat down on the floor. I'm on the floor of this lecture hall with these 3 pro-choice girls. And they said, I want to pull the curtain back for you about who we thought that you were. Because 3 days ago, we saw a poster for your speech on campus. And I'll be honest, we were livid. Like, we thought that some crazy, misogynistic, religious fanatic pro-lifer was going to come to our campus and be slandering pro-choice people, and like it was going to be horrible.
Right.
And we were terrified, and we basically felt like we had an obligation as women to stand up for other women, stand up for people that have had abortions.
Wait. They were terrified?
Yes.
Because I get the, like, we're upset, we're angry, and so we're gonna like fight. We're gonna go there and be the other side or whatever. But you said terrified.
They felt an obligation to do that because they didn't think anyone else would. But they were terrified to do it. And here's why. They pointed to several, and I won't name names, but they pointed to several videos that they had seen online of conservative and even specifically pro-life speakers on other college campuses who had treated pro-choice people horribly. They had seen videos of Q&A sessions where speakers had tried to make, a pro-choice or liberal student look like an idiot. And they thought that I was going to scream at them. That I was going to call pro-choice people idiots. Or at least lecture call them. Women murderers. At least lecture them, or at best ignore them and like not allow the pro-choice side to be heard.
Right.
That was like the best case scenario of what they thought was going to happen.
It's so sad.
I know.
This is the reputation. I
I
know we're not naming names, but this reputation is earned.
It is. I know that's a hard pill to swallow for some pro-life people, but it takes about 2 seconds on the internet to find a video that would do exactly what I'm talking about.
You don't have to name names.
I don't have to.
Google
you can
this.
find a million of them. Yes. And honestly, like, to just zoom out from the story for a second, back in my hotel room that night, that was the number one thing that stuck with me from this conversation. Like, eventually I turned it into a blog article, and there's a lot of other takeaways that I talk about and I will talk about now. But the number one thing that this experience just kind of gave to me was this overwhelming feeling of sadness that is what they expected of me. All they saw was pro-life woman coming to give speech on campus. They didn't know anything else about me. They didn't do any research on me prior to coming. I thought maybe they had when they came in with the notebooks. They hadn't. They simply expected, based on the reputation of conservatives and pro-life people, that I think is an earned reputation, that I was going to be this horrible person to them. And I was going to basically be so hurtful to pro-choice people and to people that have had abortions that these girls were terrified to stand up to me, but they felt an obligation to, because the 3 of them hadn't had any personal experience with abortion. They were just very passionate pro-choice people, and they basically wanted to come on behalf of other people who maybe wouldn't have had the guts to. They tried to get more people. They actually went to their whole entire friend group. They said they asked like 20 of their friends to come with them to the speech so they'd have more people. And everyone refused because they were too scared. So
when people wonder why we work so hard to be nice to pro-choice people, this is part of why. I remember one of the very first calls I made to someone after launching ERI. One of my first support calls, or this was a call to a colleague specifically that I just wanted him to be in the know and to hear from me that I was starting this thing. And he gave a piece of advice. I've never really used it, and I'm interested to see if you think that maybe we should be. But he basically said, I have a line that I think would be good marketing for you. I think like this is the way that you should describe what you're trying to do to like donors and stuff. He said, I think what you're trying to do is balance out the movement. You're trying to balance out, like, there's all this stuff that comes across pretty, it's a lot, and you are trying to go on the other side and work to balance things out. Don't think I've ever used that with like a donor, but there's truth to that. There's truth to like that as being part of what we're trying to do. But yeah, again, I'm really sad. We see these videos sometimes. Sometimes people send them to us. Sometimes people are asking us to like react to those or things like that. It's like,
gotten a few of those requests.
Probably not going to do it if it was put out by like a big pro-life group. Like this is not what we're trying to do. But it doesn't mean that we don't have thoughts and that it doesn't bother us when people it's like, I would much rather their side mistreat us.
Absolutely.
Than our side, especially people on our side that call themselves Christians, mistreat other people and then post it on YouTube.
And post it on YouTube in a celebratory look how idiotic this liberal is.
Right.
Like they're posting it themselves, wanting to show what a great job they did owning the lib.
Right.
Like that's the look they were going for.
Yeah.
They didn't get home to their hotel room after the speech and say, ooh, I really didn't handle that super well with that pro-choice girl today. Yeah. Like, I'm kind of embarrassed about how I handled it, and I'll never see her again, so I can't apologize. But, like, next time I shouldn't do that well. Like, no, they looked back at the footage and went, that is so great. Let's show it to the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways.
Just hold them back.
These girls thought that I was going to be that.
Yeah.
They thought that I was going to be that stereotype they'd seen on the internet. And they tried to get people to come with them. They couldn't get anyone. And so they came both in defiance and in terrified. It was like they were terrified on the inside and they put on this facade of defiance in order to get through that.
Someone's got to be at the front of the army.
Exactly.
So no one wants to be in the front of the army, but it's going to be us.
We're willing to do it.
Yeah.
And so they legitimately thought that best case scenario, I was never going to let them talk for sure. Like I wouldn't take questions from girls that are walking and wearing pro-choice billboards on their bodies.
Right.
And so they did another thing that also shocked me. They brought 2 male friends with them, which I didn't know at the time of the speech. I didn't find this out till afterwards.
They weren't dressed up in like pro-choice billboard.
There had been 2 men sitting next to each other in the row right behind the girls.
Okay.
Those were friends of the girls.
Interesting.
But they were instructed. They had this whole elaborate plan. Okay. Yeah. The 2 men walked in about 15 minutes before the speech started, and they sat themselves in the 3rd row. Then the girls came in, did not interact with them, pretended not to know them, and sat in the row in front of them. What the notebooks were for was so that the girls could take notes during my speech, and then they were going to rip off corners, write questions on them, and then pass them to the guys. Because they thought that I would never call on a bunch of loudly pro-choice girls, but I would be willing to call.
This was how they're going to get around that problem.
Yes. Because A, I'm misogynistic, obviously, if I'm pro-life.
Totally. You're pro-life,
and so I'd call on these men, but also they would look pretty normal. Just like normal college student. I'd be way more likely to call on them than on the girls. Right. And so they had this whole plan to pass questions to the guys behind them. Again, what stereotype do they have of me?
Yeah.
That they think I will only take questions from neutral-looking white men and not from these loudly feminist pro-choice girls.
Probably that you're here to post a Emily Albrecht destroys
video. Yes.
Liberals video.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so they tell me all this. They tell me the whole backstory, how they made the shirts, how they decided to come to my speech, how they invited these guy friends who then came and joined our conversation, and the 5 of us were sitting on the floor. And as they're telling me this, they were literally laughing at themselves, saying, this is ridiculous.
Oh, that's
that
cool.
We did all of this. Now that we know who you really are.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so sorry, but like, we probably scared you when we walked in. Like, this is why we did it.
Right.
And I spent a long time just talking about my common ground with all of that with them, how upset I am that was the stereotype that they had of me.
Yeah.
And how I didn't blame them.
Yeah.
They had seen these videos. I've seen those videos.
Right.
And so it makes total sense to me why they acted the way that they did. And I'm sorry on behalf of the pro-life movement, on behalf of the people who have, like, I'm not defending that behavior.
Yeah.
I'm apologizing, saying I believe that's wrong. I'm sorry that people on quote unquote my side have given you that perception.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you figured out really quickly that that's not who I was.
Yeah. Let's make a quick clarification. We're not opposed to pro-life speakers doing Q&A and giving a strong defense of their view. Like, that's not the problem. It's not the problem. So, like, well, you didn't find enough common ground or whatever. Like,
no.
Q&A in a speech is somewhere between a dialogue and a debate, and we all understand.
It's not going to be a dialogue. When you hear me, like, if you hear me respond to the question of rape in a dialogue on a college campus versus in a Q&A, it's going to sound different.
Yeah. Necessarily.
Like, necessarily. And when you listen, I did an interview for the BBC a few weeks ago when Roe happened. They asked me the question of rape.
Yeah.
And it was like, I have 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So it's going to sound different. There's going to be basic things that are there.
Right.
And so I do not expect any pro-life speaker, or any type of speaker for that matter, to treat a Q&A in the exact same way you would a one-on-one conversation. That's not not going to happen.
We're specifically talking about people actually mistreating other people.
Yeah.
Treating them as lesser, or doing things that we would say are like, this is sin. The way that you're treating this person. So just to make that
belittling them, screaming at them, trying to make them look stupid in front of the entire room.
It's different than giving a good answer to a question. Okay.
Absolutely. So these girls apologized for all of this behavior and were absolutely fascinated by my speech. We ended up spending 2 hours, the 5 of us, sitting on the floor of this lecture hall, just talking about, like, advanced philosophy.
Right.
Like, if you're a person that likes advanced equal rights argument, that is where we were. We were in like crazy land. We were in module 10 land. Nice. There was a weird thought experiment the one girl came up with sharks that we were talking about for like an hour. Like, we were way off the deep end of philosophy. Okay. Right. So far gone. Yeah. And they were just eating it up. Like, we were having fun.
Yeah.
And that would never have happened had I not started the speech the way that I did.
Yeah.
That didn't get to happen for hundreds of pro-choice students on their campus.
Yeah.
Because that was my other big takeaway from this whole experience. And that's where our conversation ended. At the end of that 2 hours, we spent maybe the last 15 minutes on this. The girls and I all agreed that it was really sad how many pro-choice students hadn't gotten the opportunity to hear me.
Yeah.
Because they too had had that perception. And it started me wondering, how many college campuses have I already gone to? Has Josh already gone to? That there's all these students who are feeling the way that those girls did, but they didn't have the guts to show up. And so what the girls suggested, which completely blew my mind, was they said, hey, could we help you make the advertising for your speech better? I was like, excuse me, what? You came as pro-choice people to protest my speech. And now you're telling me that you want to help me advertise it better so that more people hear it.
And more pro-choice people
specifically. Yes, because what they had an issue with, I don't want to say they had an issue with, but they said when they looked at the poster and the description that they got close enough to the vibe of the pro-life stereotype they've seen on YouTube that they thought I was going to be exactly like them.
Yeah.
And so they wanted to figure out a way to communicate on that poster, in that description, what the event was actually going to be like. Like, get it closer.
Yeah.
What would it have taken so that they wouldn't have been nervous or feeling like they needed to protest coming to the event?
Yeah.
And so we spent, maybe 15, 20 minutes just brainstorming. And I, like, whipped out my phone and taking copious notes. Like, what? Because I've got this focus group sitting in front of me of pro-choice people who just heard my speech, came to protest, and ended up loving it. Like, what would have changed their perception walking in?
Yeah.
And came back to ERI, jumped on a Zoom call a couple days later with Josh and Andrew, and told them this whole long story and all of my notes from the girls. And to completely pull the curtain back, we have now redone all of the advertising for this speech.
Yep.
Thanks to those girls. Yep. The number one piece of which, also the piece that shocked me the most, is that we are no longer saying, in my speeches specifically, that I am pro-life in the advertising.
Yep.
Yes, you heard that right. The pro-choice girls, it was their idea. They told me specifically in the list of things, We do not think that your poster should say that you are pro-life because, and I quote, you know so much about both sides of this issue that it shouldn't matter to someone whether you're pro-life or not. They should still come to hear what you have to say.
Wow.
And I almost fell over. I was like, what? You're pro-choice and you came to protest my speech. Like you clearly do not agree with me.
Right.
And you think that I should not tell people I'm pro-life, like, which feels borderline manipulative to me. Like, that's why we've always been super transparent about the fact that this is a pro-life speaker, because you don't want people to come to the event and feel like they were tricked into coming. And the girl said, I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about it. With the way that you start the speech, I mean, also people could look up your organization. They really want to know. It's not like you're hiding it on the internet. But if they come to the speech, they're going to realize incredibly fast that you are a person worth listening to because you know so much. And I don't think it should matter to them. And so we redid our branding based on those girls, retitled the talk. The talk now, when I give it on a college campus, is now called A Woman's View on Bodily Autonomy and Abortion. Because they also really wanted to highlight that fact that I was a woman and call it bodily autonomy. And like, they wanted to make it sound like a pro-choice speech in the advertising. The description clearly says that it is not just a pro-choice speech. We're like discussing all aspects of abortion and bodily autonomy and what that means and the implications and etc. But we then took that and I went and tested it on another campus. I did the speech then a few weeks later on a different campus with that new title and the new description, not saying I was pro-life. And I did a poll at the end. I asked people in the audience 2 questions, specifically the pro-choice people. I said, pro-lifers, I don't care what you think. You can just check out mentally for 30 seconds. I care if you're pro-choice. I've gotten to the whole end of the speech. And I told them the really abbreviated version of that story. There were these pro-choice girls who had wanted to try to help make my speech better. And they had made these suggestions and that this was my first time trying it. And so pro-choice people in the room, I want to know 2 things. I asked them to show me just like in front of their chest. They didn't have to like raise their hand or anything. Put up fingers in front of their chest and tell me on a scale of 1 to 5, how accurate did you think the advertising you saw for the speech was to what you actually got? 1 being it was super deceptive, like not even close. And 5 being, no, this is exactly what I thought I was getting into. Like no issue. And universally got 4s and 5s. To that question from the pro-choice people in the audience. They felt like it was accurate. And number 2, I asked them to give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Based on now I've seen the speech, should future advertising say that I am pro-life, was a thumbs up, or not say that I was pro-life, which is what they had gotten, was not saying I was pro-life, a thumbs down. And it was unanimously thumbs down.
Wow.
Every single pro-choice person agreed.
They were good with it.
That they were good after just having attended a speech that was advertised in the way the girls had suggested. So for the record, I've only done 1 speech since then where I tried this because then the end of the school year came along. And so I'm planning on doing that poll a couple more times in the fall because I only have, 1 campus and then those girls to go off of. And I want to make sure that this is really the right thing to do, that pro-choice people are not feeling deceived. They're feeling like they know what they're getting themselves into and it's a positive experience for everyone. So I'm going to keep trying it and keep doing that poll. But I owe all of that to these girls that came to my speech. All because they had the guts to stand up for something they believed in so much that they were willing to get over that fear hump. And come. And
then had the intellectual honesty to, once they didn't feel defensive, to like share with you, to even laugh at themselves. Like there are so many people that just generally speaking are not able to laugh at themselves, like they take themselves seriously and stuff like that. And so like the fact that like everyone was able to just like come around and just laugh about this and talk about it and commiserate, like that's just one of the best things ever. Really
it will
awesome.
Be a story that lives with me forever. I think I'll be telling it for years to come. So
let's talk about St. Olaf.
My favorite place.
Yes, we've talked about St. Olaf before, but St. Olaf has been evolving. The culture there has been evolving. Things are a little bit different than they were in like the heyday of Ollies for Life with you and Meredith and Joshua running it. Enough time has happened that it seems like the pro-choice, like the more passionately pro-choice aspect of the campus has gotten wise to how effective that group was.
Yes.
And is now seeming to be experimenting with all kinds of creative, out-of-the-box ways to neutralize that threat.
I would agree with that. I would say the pro-choice passion has definitely shrunk. There are fewer people doing things. Vandalisms have gone down dramatically. Like, there isn't as much of a whole campus against the pro-life club.
Yeah.
It now seems to be a much smaller group of people who are, as you said, being forced to get creative with the techniques that they will use to attempt to stop the pro-life club from being as effective as it is, which I think is a testament to how effective the club has been for years. I mean, I've been out for a while. COVID happened in the middle of there, and we had like a whole year without outreach, and the club is continuing to do amazing things long after I'm gone. And that has forced the pro-choice people to still be worried about the pro-life club, and to the point that they have to come up with these creative ways. So maybe let's get specific.
Well, why don't you tell the bedsheet story, and I'll tell the other two.
You can tell the other two. So I was not present for this story. You know, the Oldies for Life is one of our affiliate groups now, and so I still have regular contact with them. And I distinctly will remember the morning that I got a text from the new president there. Her name is Addie Jo. She's wonderful. Hi, Addie Jo. And hi, Oscar, also, if you're listening, other co-president there. Addie Jo is the one who texted me, but they are both instrumental to how well the club is still doing today.
They're both great.
They are. So Addie Jo texts me at like 8 in the morning, I feel. Or maybe it's got to be later than that because I didn't start outreach that early. I don't know. Anyway, she texts me, and it's just a picture of a bed sheet. And I'm like, it takes me a second to like register what's happening here. And I'm like, wait a minute. That's a bed sheet hanging from somewhere. And then she sends me another picture that's like zoomed out, and I got the whole view. So having gone to St. Olaf myself, I can sort of describe this location. We're in the student union, and it's like a multi-level building, and all of the stories have balconies that kind of hang off. Cafeteria is in the top floor, and you walk in the bottom floor, and the middle floor is like a coffee shop area, and that's where the table's set up in the middle floor. That's like the best trafficked area. Everyone walks through there. It's amazing. So that's where they're set up doing a table. And some unknown person, presumably pro-choice club related, has purchased a massive bed sheet. Like, I didn't know they made bed sheets this big. Like, I feel like it's like 5 king-size bed sheets that have been like duct taped together or something. I don't know. But there's this massive like bed sheet contraption that they have hung from the 3rd balcony of the top floor of Buntraw Commons. So it hangs down and like kind of covers the 2nd floor balcony area. I hope I'm describing this adequately. Yeah. So there's this giant bed sheet that's not hanging down and more or less blocking. It's not like completely blocking your view of like the 2nd floor, but like it's obvious. You can't miss it. When you walk in the bottom floor, you're like, what on earth? There's this giant like billboard here now, essentially. And they have written in black marker in giant letters on this bed sheet, Oldies for Life is researching you. Take their power, don't engage. Naturally, as soon as you tell a bunch of college students not to look at the man behind the curtain, what do?
They look behind the man behind the curtain.
So I can tell you that Addie Jo and Oscar informed me later, because they texted me like as it happened. Yeah. Later that day when I was talking to them, they told me that they had basically one of their busiest outreaches ever. Because as soon as you tell people not to do something, they do it. Because now everyone is curious. Everyone who didn't notice the table before is like, what the heck is going on? And so it created a lot more traffic than usual. So kind of backfired on whoever put that up. But there was a fascinating move there, a different kind of attempt to prevent pro-choice people from engaging with the pro-lifers. Because here is the big takeaway from St. Olaf, and we're going to get this in the next 2 stories as well, is that the pro-choice students on that campus have clearly figured out how effective it is when the pro-life club talks to pro-choice students. And so rather than actually attempting to counter their arguments, the pro-choice people have instead resorted to trying to prevent people from talking to the pro-lifer. Because they're like, this is working. The dialogue thing works. ERI works, guys. And so if we can just stop all the students from talking to them, then we can fix it. And so the bed sheet was an attempt to stop people from actually talking to the pro-lifers, which didn't work very terribly well. I would say the bed sheet also didn't last very long. Obviously,
they figured out it wasn't working.
They figured out it wasn't working, and the club reported it, because they're allowed to do that. And the bed sheet was gone within, I don't know, like 30 minutes or something like that. So it wasn't actually up there for that long, but there were certainly photos of it taken, and it circulated on social media in the St. Olaf world for a while. People were aware of this bed sheet having been there.
Now, do you have a sense of how long after that then I went and did outreach and the next 2 stories happened?
It wasn't that long after, because the bed sheet story happened like right away at the beginning of the school year. And then you went our big epic trip, because this was the same trip, our first trip with St. Norbert's.
Right.
This would have been in like September. So I'm going to say maybe a month between the bed sheet and the next story.
That sounds right. So I'm doing outreach with Oldies for Life. I'm not doing a speech on campus this time, but I'm joining. They're having an outreach day, and I was available to drive over and do that with them, and they were happy to have that happen. So things are going pretty normal. We're outside. We're not in Bunt Rock Commons at this point. We're outside in the courtyard area behind that. A couple of other people have booths too. We set up, sort of in the middle-ish area of that, which we're allowed to do. They've reserved space. We've got our pool table set up.
All normal things.
Yeah, just kind of everything is normal until
you knew it was coming.
Until something, and this happens so fast.
I know where this is going.
It took me a bit to process what was happening because I've been protested before. I've had people try to block others from trying to talk to us before, but this was a different thing.
This is a new tactic.
So
again, with the creativity.
I'm in the middle of a dialogue with someone, and it's like I'm seeing behind them it's like maybe half dozen pro-choice people. They are carrying a table, and they put it right in front of our table. Like not touching, like there's probably like somewhere between like 5 and 10 feet of like actual space, but it's
more or less blocking.
It's more or less blocking.
Yeah.
And it looks just like ours. They have made their own pool table. Like they've clearly taken pictures of your guys' pool table and like, we're going to make this exact, we're going to make a copy.
Yes.
So they had the red, green, and yellow, poster board. They were doing a poll. The only difference was that they were asking a ridiculous question on the poll thing. And I don't remember exactly what it was. I know we've got pictures, but it was some kind of a poop humor joke, know. And so it's like a mock poll table, making fun of us for doing this poll and also kind of blocking people from accessing us. So now I've got to I pretty quickly ended my conversation with this guy. It's like, I'm sorry. I have some other things that I need to do right now. And, I talked to Addie Jo. Addie Jo goes straight for the administration office, and Oscar and I are out there kind of handling it. And the first thing that happens is, and they do this like around lunch. Like they did this at like the busiest time of the day. And there was a crowd of people making fun of us. Like they loved this thing.
Oh, of course.
They're taking pictures and video. They're laughing. This is the best thing I've ever seen in my life. Like that kind of thing.
Someone has finally figured out how to defeat the pro-lifers.
Right.
All you have to do is make a poop humor joke on a table.
Yeah, of a pool table. And so I took a lot of video because I've learned from the past that you need a lot of video for things like this because I don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
And so I'm just in documentation mode, and I know that Addie Jo is talking to admin. And so ultimately the admin comes out and basically tells them that they need to move. Like we've reserved space. We're allowed to be here. And they, I think correctly interpret this as kind of a blocking, heckler's veto kind of a thing. And you can't do that. You could move your table over there. It's like, you can have your table. It's fine.
Right. You just can't be blocking.
You just can't be blocking someone else's table. Yeah. And they refused to move. They said, nope.
Oh.
This group is dangerous to the female students here. They are trying to make a medical procedure illegal, and they're going to cause people to die. And so we are, and we're defending the women on this campus, kind of a thing. We're not going to go. So they had a little back and forth, and then the admin goes away to like discuss what they're going to do next because now the group's refusing. So then they come back later with their lawyer, like the campus lawyer.
Oh, okay.
And like, they came up and talked to me a little bit, asked some questions or whatever, and I kind of told them what was going on. And so then they go over to them, and the lawyer's like, you have to move. You're not allowed to do this. This is blocking free speech, like, all this stuff. And they still refuse to move, kind of a thing.
Wow.
And so ultimately they decide to figure out, like, okay, well, what can we get from this group? Because like they don't want to do anything very aggressive or whatever. Right. And so eventually they're like, okay, could we if the pro-lifers move their pool table just a little bit, could they then have some space? And like they didn't answer. And so they look at me and say, would you be willing to move your table? Now I had to make a call here because sometimes like pro-life would be like, no, you're in the right. Don't move. And I was just like, hey, if this works, like, this is such a huge courtyard. It really doesn't matter exactly what spot we're in. Yeah. So the admin helped me move our table. We moved it like 15 or 20 feet away, perfectly fine. And then basically everyone watched to see what the reaction of this whole pro-choice contingency would be, which has now dropped to like 2 people.
Oh.
Like,
okay.
Everyone's kind of like distanced themselves, and they're like, we don't want to get in trouble for this. Yeah. But there's a man and a woman still there, or at least what appeared to me to be. Okay, and so they don't move. So I'm expecting they're going to move their table.
Right. I would be too.
And the weirdest thing that day is that they didn't. Like they just stayed there.
Okay.
And so then the admin's like, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and move your table to where it's allowed to be because it's not allowed to be here. You didn't reserve the space. And we're just going to work around you, basically. So the students didn't help them, but they didn't like get physical. Like the admin then just picks up the table and, and they put it over here. And what the group did as they moved the table was just take the poll question sign. So now their protest, now it's just a human protest of 2 people standing next to each other, defiantly holding one protest sign, except their protest sign is a bathroom humor joke. And they don't move.
Hold on. Hold on. So you're telling me that they don't have the rest of the table now?
No.
The table's gone. So it no longer looks like the poll question.
No.
You can't tell what
it's just a protest sign. It's just a protest sign now. It's just a piece of white poster board with some kind of poop joke on it. And they're just holding it. I just feel like there is some kind of we are not going to surrender everything. Like, we don't, like, we're not willing to get expelled for this, but we're going to be defiant. And we are willing to do some kind of, like, disobedience. We're going to break some rules here, but, like, we got to figure out what that line, I don't think they knew exactly what that line was. And so it's like, there's got to be
so I'll just grab the
parent knows there's going to be those things where it's just like the kid just wants some little win or something. And typically it's just like, you just can't let that happen. Or so many bad things are going to happen in the future. But like, that's kind of what there is like, well, we're going to hold on to this sign then.
Yeah. If you're taking our table, then at least you
can't hold on to the yes, no, and it depends signs because most of their friends had left. Had abandoned them by this point.
And so they could grab the one sign.
They just grabbed the one sign.
Which they're now standing there holding.
And then eventually the dude leaves. And now it's just the girl holding the sign.
I'm trying to picture how ridiculous. Like, I'm a student walking past on campus. I've seen none of this. I didn't see the poll table before when the whole thing was set up. I just walk by. I see the classic pro-life table I've seen for years. Because, like, the St. Olaf people have been doing this for years. Like, I'm used to seeing that as a point. I see that, and then I see one girl holding... like, what? Okay.
So... The admin and the lawyer are a bit stupefied by the whole situation. I think they were also expecting them to just like move the table back in front of ours. So they kind of like go to the perimeter. It's like, no, we're just going to like just watch
see
what happens. Like something's probably going to happen. We're just going to watch and talk to each other or whatever. So they're watching and like, I feel like at least 15 minutes goes by and she's just standing there. No one's talking to her. No one's going near her. It's just like, but she's there.
Why would you go talk to a random person holding a bathroom humor sign?
Like, to ask why. I don't know. So finally, I think like the lawyer kind of comes up and is like, so are we good? Like, like are you
okay
fine?
with this?
And I'm
Yeah.
like, she can stand there with the sign. I don't care. Like, all we care about is people being able to dialogue with us. As long as they're not blocking, I don't have any problem. They can protest. They can do whatever. I'm not anti-free speech or anything. I just, we just want everyone to be able to have those conversations. It's like, yep, we're completely on board. So here's, the phone number to campus security if something comes up. Here is my direct number. Call me if something happens, and I'll come back out. And so, I'm alert. I'm paying a lot of attention to like my surroundings, and I'm kind of now like the de facto like security guy of the outreach. And nothing else ends up really happening, at least aggressive, until there's one kind
until
of
the other story,
annoying issue that happened that day. But
yes,
but eventually, I don't know what I would love to know what the inner monologue for the girl was, but eventually she decides I'm not doing this anymore, and so she just like I don't know if I've ever seen someone with more tail tucked between their legs, kind of just like put the sign down and just like Snoopy sad walk into or Charlie Brown, and just like walk away, never to be seen again. So that was interesting.
No kidding.
And then this other thing happened that it didn't happen for the first time, but it's the first time that I saw this person. There's a very specific person that came to be disruptive to the outreach, although disruptive in a much more subtle way, which is his goal is to be kind of weird and interrupt everyone's conversations to disrupt them. So if Addie Joe is talking to this pro-choice student, he's going to come in and he's going to start asking questions that are way off topic. Like he stays on abortion for a little while.
Sure.
It's just some kind of ridiculous things and some accusations and stuff. And it's acting like aggressive and weird. And even a lot of the pro-choice people are, kind of like
what?
And then he starts talking about, like, if I remember right, I feel like he was talking about like libertarianism or maybe anarcho-capitalism and then eventually about his satanic cult that he's a part of. And like, and it just gets weirder and weirder and weirder.
And turns off both the pro-choice person that you're talking to.
Turns everybody off. Turns everyone off from dialogue. Like, and effectively so. Like there were people that we didn't talk to because at some point they were just like, and just kind of left.
We're having a productive conversation with a pro-lifer.
Right.
Then they get interrupted.
Right.
This guy talks for a couple minutes and they're like, I'm out, which is very understandable.
Yeah. So I tried to be the guy jumping on the grenade this time, because obviously we know, okay, well, someone is going to have to just
talk to this
be
guy.
The buffer between, everything good happening and this guy, and he, I think, basically was ready for that, or maybe had seen that technique used before because he wasn't letting it work. Like he would talk to me for a while.
He's been a known entity at our outreaches at St. Olaf for a while. He started my senior year and he has continued. He is a known entity.
He would talk to me for a while, and then he would get, probably wouldn't get bored. He would kind of say, oh, there's like something else I can disrupt over here.
Right.
So then
anytime
just
there's a new pro-choice person that would appear at the table, he would kind of ditch the conversation he was in.
And he'd start over.
Interrupt.
He would do the same talking points from that he started with that has not been persuasive to anybody before, but he's like that's his. He's got his pitch. Or
he has
his
occasionally had a sign. Did he have a sign when he was there with you?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But
when he first started coming to St. Olaf, I'm 99% sure that he had his own like little mini sign that he would carry around.
Yeah.
And it was a sign of 2 QR codes. One was people to donate to Planned Parenthood.
He did have that.
He did have the sign. Okay.
Yes.
He has this little sign.
He didn't have it the whole day. But when he first came up,
eventually.
He had a QR code sign.
So QR code sign, one QR code was to donate to Planned Parenthood, and the other was to donate to his satanic cult that he was a part of. Yes.
So and that's, I think, part of why he was so off-putting was because, now that jogs my memory, like part of his initial thing was like in his opening move, besides sort of insulting the pro-lifer or saying like they're just making a bunch of dumb lies and arguments. And
you don't need to listen to them.
You don't need to listen to them. But also, by the way, I'd really encourage you to like donate to Planned Parenthood. I've got this QR code. But it's like he does this switch to, I think you should donate so fast like in the awkward way a lot of people
and donate to my satanic cult.
Yeah.
Which immediately people are like,
that shouldn't,
excuse me, what?
He should have edited that out of his plan. Like, that's not helping his cause.
Right. If you're trying to convince pro-choice people that you're the reasonable one, not the pro-lifer, asking people to QR code donate to a satanic cult is probably not your opening move.
Right. I mean, it was just weird. It was just weird. And so, so I kind of spent just, a lot of time that day trying to be the buffer. Every once in a while, other leaders of the group. Meredith ended up coming over for a while because she heard that all the craziness going on. So she kind of came to be back up. And so, I think she probably talked to him at some point or whatever. And, so I think definitely the trend, the thing that connects all three of these stories is they're trying to disrupt or prevent the pro-life students in our affiliate group from talking to anybody. And they're trying different methods of doing that, which I don't think, like, if the best thing your side can do is to try to censor the other side's arguments, it's at least a hint that maybe you're wrong. Maybe, I mean, it's not definite. And this is an inductive, not a deductive argument. Okay. But I'm just saying, like, it's not great for your side if that's like the only move.
Right.
And so as annoying as like that guy was, I thought it was interesting that like at this point, like we're not getting, he's not arguing against anything that we're saying at this point. Right. He just doesn't want other people talking to the pro-lifers. Yeah.
I think it's also a big encouragement to pro-life people out there that you can never do outreach too much. I mean, my club has now been doing it for years and years and years. Point. And I always get questions from new affiliate groups like, how often should we be doing this? At what point are people going to get tired of it? Yeah. People don't get tired of it. You're going to keep talking to the same people over and over again. They're going to have more questions. Yeah. There's now been an environment it created at St. Olaf where that pool table is expected and normal. No one thinks anything of it. It's not like, it doesn't create a bunch of hostility. It's just like everyone knows, oh, this is a great place to go have conversations. And they keep having very busy outreaches, despite the fact that they've been there. Right. And so you can do that, A, and B, it works. Yep. Because the pro-choice students, the remaining ones who are like still passionate about this, know it works so well that they're trying to prevent it from happening.
Yeah. Okay, let's try to blitz through the rest of this outline because
we just have so much to say.
It's so tempting to make this a 3-part thing, but let's not. Let's just try. We can kind of just wrap this up. So I am doing outreach at Johns Hopkins University as well as a speech because Joshua Head, who was the co-president with you at Always for Life, he transferred to Johns Hopkins and he took over the pro-life group there.
He's also our newest staff member.
He's also our newest staff member. He's coaching at least one club. He's doing some video editing. It's so great having him on the team. I've got so many nice things to say about Joshua. But it was really cool to get a chance to see him in this element where it's just him leading, right? It's not like there's not like a combo of like him and Emily and Meredith and like others. It's like this is just Joshua doing his thing, and he was fantastic. Really good leader. So we're doing this outreach, and the kind of the interesting trend that we noted that day, and it happened that day, and then Joshua confirmed like this has been a general trend that they've seen at Johns Hopkins, is they're getting more people biting bullets, but biting specifically the squirrel bullet.
Interesting.
They are getting more squirrel biters who are like, well, like who's to say that squirrels aren't persons? And so that was interesting, and that makes more sense to me. It makes more sense to me that people would be biting that bullet than the infanticide bullet, which is kind of the other most common one that we talk about. If you're going to go one direction, it's definitely a better view to be like, maybe we should not ever kill any squirrels either, like or something like that. But they're getting that, and there was a student named Natalie in the club. She might have been in leadership too. I don't remember, but when we were debriefing at the end of the day, she told this story about how she actually basically converted someone to be pro-life. And the way she did it was very interesting. I had to be like, what do I even think about that move?
Interesting.
So Natalie was talking to a Jainist who, basically believes that everything, every at least living being in the universe has value. You know, all the animals have value, even the bugs have value.
The grass,
trees, things like that. Yeah. And so Natalie's approach, instead of doing like well, let's talk about Jainism and whether Jainism makes the most sense of our intuitions as a worldview, she basically just turned the tables and made the Jainism work for her. By basically saying, well, you should be pro-life because you're being so inclusive. You're being inclusive about all the animals, but why not just extend that to all the humans instead of some of the humans? And the girl's like, oh, yeah. You know, like, it was as simple as that. There wasn't a long debate. I think that was basically the conversation. Dialogue. And then she's like, yeah, I think I'm against all the killing of all the humans, just like all the others. Like you have to be at this point, right? And so so she's pro-life. She didn't hear any counter arguments to Jainism, so that became kind of the discussion. Do you go after this kind of deeper worldview issue, or do you just like, hey, you can be a Jainist and pro-life, so like let's just kind of work with that? And I think my intuition is that she did exactly the right move, because it's really hard to get someone to change their entire worldview in one day. Like, you know, we talk about how when we're talking to, like, if we kind of figure out that we're talking to a moral relativist or a utilitarian, we will often just kind of do a full frontal assault on why those worldviews are wrong, because you're just not likely to get them pro-life in that view. If you don't think anything is wrong, you're not going to get them to think abortion is wrong. Like, it's not the move.
But if they have a view that's able to be held consistently with the pro-life position, like Jainism makes sense to be held consistently with being pro-life, then there's something to be said with letting them stay there. Yeah.
Because it's a more incremental step.
Right.
That's way easier than getting her to, like, think of, you know, several million species maybe suddenly not having the value that she thinks in her head. Right? And so that was the direction she went. It worked really well. But I thought it was just like interesting the way that she kind of thought outside the box, and I thought did something really effective.
Yeah. I also want to camp on the idea of squirrel biters for a second, because I've also seen that trend this past year, that I've seen a few more people initially sound like a squirrel biter. And I'm using that word very carefully.
Interesting.
Because I've started doing something as I've been training pro-life clubs over this past year, and even just in some of the seminars that I do, when I teach the equal rights argument, I've kind of added an extra half step. I'm calling it a half step. So if you are someone that doesn't know what I mean when I say how to teach the equal rights argument, like, just pause this.
Right.
Go watch our video on the YouTube channel. We'll link to it about the equal rights argument.
Yeah.
Because it's going to make no sense otherwise. So if you know how to make the equal rights argument, you know that basically in step 2, what I'm doing is I'm sorting who belongs in and who belongs out of the Equal Right to Life Club.
Right.
And in that, we ask about human adults, human newborns, and squirrels. If I ask them if squirrels should be included in the Equal Right to Life Club, and they say yes, I always pause and ask this clarification, because I think I've discovered that there are a lot of people who initially say yes, because they're like, I think it's wrong to kill squirrels. Like, in their head, they're thinking it's wrong to kill squirrels, therefore I should say that they're in.
Right.
And even if I did a really great job of setting up the Equal Right to Life Club, and I really clarified what it is, it still didn't quite get through, and they're a little confused.
Yeah.
And so I take a minute and I say, I totally agree with you that squirrels, like, have some level of value. Like, I totally think it would be wrong to torture squirrels for fun or something. That's gross and disgusting. But I don't think they're literally the same as you and I. Like, I feel like they belong in maybe this other club. Like, what if we had the it's wrong to torture you for fun club? That's literally what I call it. The it's wrong to torture you for fun club. I feel like squirrels are totally in that club.
Right.
But I think that's a distinct club from the Equal Right to Life Club, where the human adults and the newborns are in. Because squirrels are different than that. It's not as wrong to kill them as it is to kill these, but they still have some level of value.
Right.
What do you think about that idea? They will 99% of the time be like, oh yeah, that's totally what I meant. And I'm like, cool, we're on the same page, and then we can move on.
Now I'm frustrated that I haven't been asking that question for years now, because I wonder if that would have, like, taken care of almost every squirrel biter that I've dealt with.
When I've done it, probably over this past year, is kind of when I invented this idea. It took care of all but one.
That's
because
so
most people just have an initial intuition of, I like squirrels. I don't want them to be hurt. Like, and they just say yes. And if you assume that that means they're actually biting the squirrel bullet,
which they typically do,
then that's going to send you down a long path you don't need to go down.
Yeah.
Whereas if I just quickly clarify,
yeah,
and I do it by saying, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think they belong in this club versus this club, the Throwing Torch You for Fun club versus the Equal Right to Life club.
Yeah.
If I lay that out and they say, no, I truly think squirrels go in the human adults and human newborns club, now I have so much more information.
Right.
But 99% of the time, they're just meaning it shouldn't be tortured for fun.
It's so interesting that my move of taking their word as like, this is what they actually believe has led me astray. Probably like there's like the very, I think, thoughtful thing that you're doing. It's kind of like, maybe they really don't. Maybe they're sane and they're so confident that they understand what I'm saying.
But they don't actually understand.
But they're wrong about that.
Yeah.
And so let's factor that possibility in. Again, making clarity completely our responsibility and bearing as much of that weight as we can. That is so interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
So I think we've given enough stories for the last two. I mean, we've gone for like 2 hours with stories.
Yep.
Let's talk about some like overarching theme takeaways that can be applied to all of our future outreaches and other people's future outreaches. So just kind of like what we've learned. So the biggest one to me, and this is fun because we haven't actually talked about this in any of the stories specifically, but we saw a big trend over this past year of people selecting it depends.
Yep.
In other words, in our poll table, standard the way we do it, we have our question, should abortion remain legal? And then there's a yes, a no, and an it depends. And for years, no one picks it depends.
I mean,
like
several do, but only several.
Okay. We're talking like, let's say you do an outreach and 100 people vote. Yeah. You're going to get like 70 yeses. You're going to get maybe 20 no's. You're going to get 7 people that eat the piece of candy, and then you're going to get 3 people that put it in it depends.
Right.
Like, you are not going to get any statistically significant number of it depends.
Yeah.
And I would say mostly the reason we kept using it depends is because it like demonstrates visually that we accept nuanced answers.
Right.
And in reality, most people you talk to are actually it depends.
Yes.
Like they're yes, they went and put it in yes, and then you find out that they're against late-term abortions. And so it's like, actually, you're it depends.
Most pro-lifers are in the it depends category too. Especially depending on how you define abortion and the ectopic pregnancy thing.
Right. Isn't ectopic pregnancy treatment an abortion?
There is a lot of people who identify as pro-life that have a rape and incest exception. Like most people are it depends. And almost no one has ever said, which was kind of frustrating because just pull the curtain back, that was my idea. Everything about the poll table we do is exactly what Justice for All does, except for this one thing that we added in our very first outreach. Because I was just I was hearing the way people were talking about the need for more nuanced conversations. And I was trying to put myself in a person's shoes, looking at this thing and being like, maybe they feel like we're trying to force them into an extreme. Let's just visually show them before they even get to us, show them that that's not happening. Let's try adding it depends and have this. And I thought it was going to be like this really awesome thing that really helps our outreaches. And it has,
no one uses it.
It has a very, I don't know the effect it has. I do still think it indicates nuance. And it's more interesting to have that third option. But yeah, it's every single outreach. I'm like,
until
almost no one signed my it depends option until
now.
This last year.
So this last year, across all of the campuses that we visited, we saw dramatically more people choosing it depends. It's happening in a variety of states, a variety of types of colleges and universities.
Happened to Johns Hopkins when I was there.
Right. And it happened when I was out at St. Norbert's. It happened to me in Rhode Island. All over the place.
It happened to St. Norbert's, even though you guys weren't screwing around with the poll.
You have to go listen to part 1 if you missed that. Anyways, so what I believe the thing is here that we're seeing is an increase in anger and hostility because of the Supreme Court issue on one side. And on the other side, an increase in I'm unsure what to think. Because when you actually talk to the students who put it in it depends, most of them, it was not because their view was actually in it depends. It was because they really weren't sure what to put. And that felt like the more neutral, nuanced position. Because most people my age have spent their entire lives with Roe as the law of the land. And like, I don't even need to think about abortion. My default view is being pro-choice because that's just the way that it is, right? Like there's been no need to think about it. And so suddenly now that the Supreme Court was actually considering the issue, they were having to take a step back and say, I should maybe reevaluate this for the first time in my life, like actually figure out what my position is. And so they were putting it depends out of that kind of curiosity of, I want to see how this turns out. I want to see what society says. And my affiliate group at Quincy University, who I did not visit, I was not there this past year, but they were doing outreach on their own. They did something genius that I want to recommend. I mean, I don't know if I for sure want to recommend because I haven't tried it, but like I'm fascinated and I want to try it. To all of my other groups that are doing outreach, which is that they made their middle sign, it depends / I'm not sure.
Oh.
Yeah. And so they got a lot more clarity from the people who placed it in there. They basically told me when I was debriefing with them afterwards over Zoom that all the people who put it in the middle either had a rape exception, and that's why they put it in the middle, or they really genuinely didn't know, and they cited the Supreme Court. This was back, they did their outreach in May, so it was right before end of the school year and Dobbs happened. This particular outreach, they were citing the Supreme Court as the specific reason that they were like, I don't have enough information right now that I feel like I can have a solid opinion about this. And so I'm fascinated by that. I want to try.
Totally
and it depends.
This is
I'm
probably a way improvement.
I know. I know. I'm super proud of the club. They came up with this completely on their own.
Cool.
And they had in their outreach, they told me about, I think 70 people took the poll total that afternoon. I think they did outreach for like 2 hours in the afternoon. And 27 people picked the it depends / I'm unsure.
27?
Yes.
Out of roughly how many?
Out of like 70. It's almost half.
Dude.
Fascinating.
That's mind-blowing.
So we're going to be trying that. Just pulling the curtain back about what we're going to be trying.
I didn't know about that, but we're doing that.
You guys out there who do outreach, go try it. Report back. If you have an interesting thing happen, whether you're one of our affiliate groups or you're not, send me an email. Emily@equalrightsinstitute.com. Tell me what happens at your outreach because I'm fascinated by this concept of it depends / I'm not sure.
Okay, so we also wanted to just offer a few more practical tips for pro-life people doing outreach or even just having dialogues right now based on some of the things that we've been learning from our outreaches, from the people that you're coaching who are doing outreach. And so a couple of those things briefly. So one, I think it is really important for pro-life people to be specifically talking about their life of the mother exception part of their view whenever kind of they do their elevator pitch on why they're pro-life.
Interesting.
It's never been something that I've done.
Yeah, that's not something I've done either.
I don't probably never done this before. It's just like I've been thinking, for basically the entire year. I've been thinking how to try to optimize the pro-life movement in a post-Roe reality, and kind of watching potential mistakes that can be made on the pro-life side and things to try to avoid. And we're basically behind the scenes trying to help the pro-life movement avoid a couple of landmines, and one of those revolves around life of the mother exception things and how we define things. We're not going to get into all that right now. I'll link to multiple podcasts so you can listen to. Or, we talked about it in the Dobbs
webinar, the post-Roe webinar.
So you could listen to it there, or we did a whole podcast with Dank Pro-Life Memes about that one time. And all of that is still kind of relevant here. The fact that pro-life and pro-choice people are defining abortion differently can mean they really misunderstand each other. But it's part of why so many pro-choice people don't think that pro-lifers have a life of the mother exception, because they're so used to seeing pro-lifers that are like, I'm against all of the abortions. And in their mind, the pro-choice person's mind, they're like, oh, well, that means if you need to intervene for ectopic pregnancies or whatever. It's like, that's not what the pro-lifer meant.
Right.
Probably. There is a small contingency of pro-lifers that are that extreme. But most pro-lifers do not think that women should have to commit suicide via pregnancy. And so I just think like at this point now, if you're doing your elevator pitch on why you're pro-life, it's worth adding one sentence or a couple of sentences. And so for me, that means I'm against all of the abortions, but I am not opposed to medical intervention if a mother's life is at risk because of her pregnancy and they can't save both of them. Like, we're all on board. At that point, we have to intervene. Like, you can just say something like that, because boy, if the pro-choice person figures that out about you in the beginning, that might make your whole dialogue way better. Because if they think that you're like, no, I would rather women die of their pregnancies than allow any kind of a DNC to ever happen, or any kind of any ending of any pregnancy, no matter why, then they think they're talking to a far less reasonable person. I'm sorry. And so, like, we want them to know that you're reasonable and thoughtful and smart and common groundy and nice and like all those things as quickly as possible. It helps the conversation. And so I just think that is the thing at this point. I'm surprised by how many pro-choice people are confused about pro-lifers having life of the mother exceptions. And I don't know how much of that is maybe being pushed from like pro-choice leadership that is like trying to, because I definitely see people, I think, intentionally misleading grassroots pro-choice people into being more afraid than they ought to be. Yeah. So maybe, I don't know, but pro-lifers can at least try to add that clarity as often as possible.
Absolutely. So in the tip we kind of gave in the middle of the podcast of make sure that you're practicing your pro-life elevator pitch, go check out the article about the new elevator pitch that we got from the Minimize Project. In kind of learning and memorizing that new elevator pitch, that's a really interesting point of consider how you could add in or where else in your conversation you can make it very clear what you think about situations where the mother's life is at risk. I really like that. I want to experiment with that myself. How to kind of add that in to the elevator pitch we got from Marin.
There was a thing that I noticed at Johns Hopkins University also, that this is more nitpicky, but I noticed at least in one case where the pro-life person was using the word rights when I think it would have been better for them to be using a different word. So something like maybe significant moral status, which is like that's like the phrase that Di Silvestro uses when he's talking about, like, you know, what is a person? A person is something with significant moral status, or SMS for short. And so in this case, someone has said that they thought that rights were based on the mother's wishes. And it's easier.
Like the fetus's rights would be based on. Okay.
Right. And that on its face makes more sense if you're using the word rights in that sentence than if you change that to moral status. It doesn't make very much sense to think that an entity's moral status would change based on what the mother wants, but their rights might. I mean, there are you know, rights that kids just don't have by the nature of being kids or whatever. And so I was just like, look, just to avoid that confusion, just, you know, if you see that maybe being a confusion, they're using rights that way, maybe try to make sure, like, are they talking about like legal rights and things like that, or are they talking about the person's value? Because we don't believe that your value changes based on what your parents think.
Yeah. So I think this is a great example of just having the awareness in the conversation to try to understand what a pro-choice person means rather than the words that they're saying. Because generally I'm in the boat of we shouldn't use philosophy words when we don't have to.
I agree with that.
Because they're confusing. So I would say I should basically always talk about rights, not significant moral status. Because if I just start out a conversation with a random average pro-choice person and say significant moral status, they're going to think I'm some weird, like, hoity-toity intellectual. Like, we're not going to be able to have a good conversation because they're automatically a little turned off by my philosophy words. But if I'm using the word rights and I can start to tell, because I take clarity to be completely my responsibility, that they are not maybe quite on the same page about what rights mean, or they're using the word a little differently. That's a situation in which it seems like it would be better to switch language.
Or ask them if this is what they mean, or something like that. Like, there's different ways you can go about it. I agree. It's definitely good to try to avoid philosophy language, unless you're talking to a philosopher. In that case, totally use it as helpful, you know, for multiple reasons. But yeah, I think being on the lookout for it, understanding that's one more of many equivocations that can happen in this dialogue is going to help the pro-life person.
Absolutely. So another kind of trend-esque tip thing that we've been seeing is just the fact that people my age and younger, this kind of Gen Z area. I am Gen Z, and I hate the fact that I'm Gen Z, but it's true.
I'm barely a millennial.
You're barely a millennial.
I'm like 1 year from the cutoff. I think 82, I think, is the cutoff. I'm 83. So I'm technically a millennial. We had to find out when Students for Life, like 5 or 6 years ago, we're doing like all of the pro-life millennial heroes was going to be their catch-all defender of life award for the conference. And so they were having to call some of these people, find like, are you a millennial? I'm like, define millennial. I don't know, 82. Okay, yeah, I'm. So like Stephanie Gray and I were like barely
technically kind of millennials.
But yeah, anyway.
All right. So
we got the award.
Amazing. So there's been kind of this overall trend that people in my generation, a lot of the younger people these days, think of everything as biased. Like there's a very big concern that anything that comes from a side that is not yours, like if the source is from an opposite side, therefore whatever the object is that we are looking at or talking about is inherently biased.
Wait,
therefore
clarification.
Yes.
By bias, do they mean deceptive? Like because of bias? Or do they just mean that group has an opinion? Because that doesn't feel very significant.
Right. I'm going to say mostly the former. So they're saying that group has an opinion, and therefore I cannot trust anything that group puts out.
Right. Okay.
Not necessarily because it is inherently deceptive.
Yeah.
But because they have a bias, and that is inevitably going to seep into their material, even if they're attempting to be neutral.
Yep.
And so I can just write off and ignore whatever they have to say because it is inherently biased.
Yeah.
That's been an issue we've been seeing whenever specifically I try to yank out our outreach brochure. I love our outreach brochure. It's great. If you haven't worked with it before, there's pictures of fetal development in the first few pages, and then there are some graphic abortion images in the last few pages. Right. And we are a group that thinks that those images can be really helpful in a conversation. Yeah. But if someone has gotten their walls down first, I've been able to talk with them for a while, and they consent to seeing those images, they're going to be way more likely to make a lasting impact on them.
Right.
And so I carry that outreach brochure in my back pocket when I'm at outreach.
Yeah.
And in an increasing number of times, especially as of late, that I actually do pull out that outreach brochure, which is not in every conversation.
Yeah.
But when I do pull it out, there has been an increase in skepticism about any of the information in the brochure being accurate, purely because it came from us. Yeah. There is a desire to not want to trust authority. Yeah. Everything is a conspiracy. Everything is biased. And so we've gotten accusations that the images of fetal development that came out of a science textbook, like clearly those are fake. Right. We doctored them.
Right.
Even though they're from an embryology textbook.
Right.
And like, it doesn't matter where we say it's from or even having the source on it.
Right.
If you say where the image is from, it doesn't matter because we put it in our brochure.
We've always had
the source there. But because it is in our brochure and we are biased.
Our logo's on it.
Yes. Therefore, they can write it off. I'm not saying this is a logical position because it is not.
Right.
So clarification.
Yeah.
But that is the reality. And I think it is more helpful most of the time to just not bring out the brochure at all and not put a potential landmine in the middle of our conversation than to try to convince them, try to go against this mindset that they have that I don't have to listen to anything that's biased.
I have a quick analogy for this.
Yes.
A long time, like early in my pro-life speaking career, I got the chance to do a talk in front of Scott Klusendorf. This was a big deal for me.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was going to happen until like I'm on my way there, and Scott was like, "Hey, I'm going to be at the thing." Like, he'd heard about it, and was not that far from him, and so like for me at this point in my life, this was like a garage band playing in front of Metallica. I'm like, this is amazing, kind of a thing. And it was really sweet of him to do that. Scott loves being an intentional encouragement to young pro-life people. There are a lot of pro-lifers that are at least partly active because of Scott, and I'm certainly one of them. And so, but I remember this little conversation that we had. I've never talked about this in public, but we had this little conversation about PowerPoint. With ours using PowerPoint, I've always, I at that point, I was always a big PowerPoint person. I would sometimes use movie clips and all kinds of things. Yeah. And he had basically already worked out that he was an anti-PowerPoint guy, that he was his basic advice to all speakers, and he gives a lot of speaking advice to young speakers. He's a very good speaker, is to like, don't use PowerPoint. Is more likely than not, it's just going to be a distraction. You're going to be fumbling around dealing with the electronics. Like it's not worth it. There's more cons than pros, unless you are very, very good. If you are like Steve Jobs, then, and you can make it like you're not even the one controlling it, like it's just happening, you're not reading off the screen, like fine, there are exceptions, and you say you're probably one of the exceptions, but generally speaking, I'm not convinced that like I should be using PowerPoint for sure, and I don't think probably most people should be using PowerPoint. It's like, but like that would be like an example, like you could hear that and be like, but this is like this powerful tool, I can put up all these images and all these different things, and it can be a powerful tool, but it's also like very plausible that can actually end up working against you. And I think you're giving an example of, here's a case where a tool that has been really helpful for us in the past might, at least for a while, be less effective merely because of this societal thing happening. And I actually think it's bigger than the abortion debate.
Oh, absolutely.
This is part of the tribalism thing that's going on, where we've gotten to the point where everyone's sides basically are working off their own sets of facts, which is not good.
Not
it's
helpful.
Really, really bad. And there's so many things I basically shouldn't say right now about that. But that is just a thing that is going on. It's a thing that is going on both sides a lot. And we are seeing like basically just like an example of that affecting the abortion debate. I'm just saying it's even bigger than this. And they're doing this. They're seeing people older than them doing the exact same thing. In fact, I would say they're even being taught, if they're watching like mainstream media or people debate online, where they're being taught to do this. And now we're having to kind of like, okay, how do we pivot to most effectively react to that? Yeah.
So last tip. Yeah. We've been going for a long time here between our two parts.
I'll do this quickly.
Yes.
I had a thought. It's another thought that I had at Johns Hopkins, which I didn't get to do it, but like basically like walking over the campus. I was thinking about, there was someone that had a conversation about, it's kind of like a cultural relativism thing. So when you're talking to a moral relativist, it's kind of like two categories. It's kind of two subcategories, kind of like bodily rights arguments. And this is the most typical one, like individual relativism. It's like whatever's true for me might not be true for you, and vice versa. Everyone's got their own truth, their own moral truth even. But then there's like kind of a cultural version that's more like, we shouldn't judge other cultures. Other cultures are going to decide what's right and wrong for them, and we can decide what's right and wrong for us. Like, we shouldn't be judgy about cannibalism that might be happening, still on some island somewhere, or whatever, because that's their culture.
Right.
Doesn't mean that we should be cannibals, but it's just like, we're not going to judge them, kind of a thing.
It comes, I think, a lot from a place of the diversity, equity, inclusion movement, where these days people want to be really understanding of other cultures, people who think differently from us, who grew up differently from us, and like make sure that we are giving other cultures the respect that they
So that's coming from a great place.
I think it's coming from a great place. And I think it's also why cultural relativism, to me, is the more popular of the two that I see today. I don't see either one that often.
Yes.
But that one is definitely more, and I think that's why.
More often. So the hard thing is, the kind of classic response to that is Nazis. And because obviously, that Nazis could think this is right and it not be right. And, they can end up wrong in front of a, tribunal, for war crimes. And so the problem, though, is, and we've talked about this sometimes, it's just like there's this interesting thing about bringing up Nazis in dialogues now. It doesn't work very well, basically, almost ever, because young people have been taught by this thing called Goblin's Law, which is an internet law that was written by this guy named Godwin, who basically said that the longer an internet debate is going on, the likelihood that someone is going to reference the Holocaust, it becomes one. Like, at some point, it's going to happen.
Right.
And at that point, like, it's just everything kind of is going to go downhill. And young people have taken that to a further level to basically say any reference to the Holocaust is out of bounds. It's red flag on the play. Walk yourself back, try again, because that's an invalid argument, which is obviously not okay. But that's kind of where our society is. And I've tried working around it. I've tried like talking about goblins a lot to the person I'm talking to. And so far that hasn't been very effective. But but what I have found to be effective is just point to other examples. There's so many examples you can point to, as far as I can tell, as long as it's not specifically the Nazi Holocaust, you're are safe. A lot more likely to be safe. And there is a very real current example going on right now that everyone is at least a little bit aware of. That is a really helpful example of why cultural relativism isn't correct, which is the Russia-Ukraine war going on right now, or maybe more right to say like the Russian invasion of Ukraine and trying to take it over. And
which, for the record, it is currently July when we are recording this. Maybe this...
I don't know what's going on by the time this comes out. Like, Ukraine is so amazing that Ukraine is like been this underdog that is like doing all these amazing things. It's been really cool to watch. And the leader of Ukraine is easily the most inspiring political leader I think I've ever seen in my entire life. And people should look into that guy. And his history is interesting. And he
and controversial and all of the things.
Only became inspiring very recently. Like he has had a massive change. He was a comedian, and then he kind of became the president because of a TV series that he was a star of about a comedian becoming the president of Ukraine.
It's wild.
Everyone's like, this is way better than what we have right now. He wins an election. Not expecting to, but you know, we're living at a time where actors are more likely to win elections right now. So that's the thing. And so he does that, and then he becomes like unpopular. He makes some missteps and things, and then this happens. And the way that he's led Ukraine this time, it just makes me want to cry watching videos and things that he does. So I've been following this a lot, and I'm not going to get graphic. Although it's probably good for people, if they're going to use this, to learn some things that they can be specific about. But the way that many Russian soldiers have behaved in the invasion is very clearly war crimes. There is torture, there is sexual violence going on. It's insane. There's a recording of a call from one of these soldiers to his wife in Russia, bragging about how they're doing all of this stuff, all of this sexual violence, and she asks why they're doing it. It's just because they're weaker. Like, this is like a huge thing that is happening, and it wouldn't be hard for anyone to go find evidence of that. And there's a lot of evidence of it, and then like the question becomes, what do we do of it about it? And that's really complicated. But I think if I'm talking to a cultural relativist tomorrow, this is the example I'm going to. Is there such a difference between, like, there are a lot of Ukrainian soldiers that have gotten Russian POWs and have treated them so much better than those soldiers were treated on the Russian side. Like Russia's not even treating their own soldiers well. And I'm not saying that Ukraine has never done anything. I'm not saying like there's no examples of POWs being mistreated. I'm sure there probably are. I'm just saying I know of stories that I don't think are just propaganda of Ukrainians treating the Russians a lot better than the Russians have treated the Ukrainians. The Russians have sometimes been like, we're just going to obliterate the city, and we're just going to hurt or kill everyone here, and as long as we think we can get away with it. And then if it looks like we're going to lose the city, then we're going to like flee as quickly as we can and try to literally burn the evidence into ashes. And so this is a lot like the Holocaust in a lot of ways, and yet I think that talking about this without using the word Holocaust will likely be effective, at least for some people, where talking about the Nazi Holocaust would kind of trigger them into thinking, oh, wait, you just did a move. That's not okay. I think, like, as tribalistic as our society is, this is like the one thing that almost everyone agrees on, which is that what Russ is doing is wrong and bad, and like everyone is kind of rooting for Ukraine, regardless of their political affiliation.
Or how much they think we should get involved or not.
They might disagree about that, right? Yeah. That for sure, there's a lot of disagreement about like what Biden should be and should not be doing right now. And I'll just say, knowing, some about that, I think that's probably more complicated than a lot of people think.
Sure.
I don't know what I would even be doing in this place, but I get it. And it's really hard. And I was just like, I thought of that example, and it's like, I think this is something that could be helpful for people, at least right now. I don't know for how long that'll be helpful, but I think that could be helpful. And we just wanted to kind of give that as a practical tip based on, kind of things that we've been thinking about.
So I hope that this podcast has been helpful for you all, just to go through a bunch of fun stories. You got a window into Josh and Emily doing outreach, and things happen to us that we don't expect.
Yep.
You get to see us just thinking on our feet and trying to react to weird, crazy new situations.
Yep.
And hopefully you were able to get something out of this, whether you're a person that does outreach or not. We're all people that get to engage with the culture of being pro-choice right now and kind of seeing how things have changed. And so hopefully we can be there for you a little bit.
Let this be the final point, is that we are like you. I was on the phone with Emily and Meredith when this mock pool table got put in front, like, what do you think I should do about this? Like, I didn't even know what to do about this. We haven't had situation happen before. Like, we're all doing our best here. And I think there are sometimes pro-lifers that just feel like, well, we can't do like what Josh and Emily do. And I was telling you, like, we're trying to figure this stuff out too. And we're having these conversations. Our staff had a whole debate about the girls' idea about how to market your events and a discussion, and we're still thinking about that. And so we're all trying to figure this out. We're doing our best. It's a hard time to be having dialogues, but we ought to be having dialogues, when we can, when the person you're talking to is open. And just don't hold back just because you feel like, well, you don't have enough experience yet, because you will never probably feel like you have enough experience. We will never be completely ready for everything. It's okay. Go in there, be friendly, loving pro-lifers, and like, you can't fail. Like, you can't like do something out there that I'm going to be disappointed that you went out there. If you go out and be a jerk to people but use great arguments, I'm going to be disappointed. But if you go out there and you don't know how to respond to any of the questions, but you're nice and loving and make it more likely the person's going to talk to either you or another pro-lifer in the future, I'm very happy. So everyone relax. It's going to be okay. Go have a good conversation.